Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully you took the survey. And so one of the questions I asked you is, what is the maximum benefit of a leaf? And you should be able to read this off of this graph, right? The maximum benefit is around 50 or 60, right? I don't really need you to be that precise right now, but we can see that the maximum benefit we can read off of the asymptote of this graph. It's somewhere between 50 and 60 depending on the plant. All right, so that's the maximum benefit that a plant can get. What units is this in? Well, we just read this off of the y-axis, right? It's in per area per time. So it's carbon gain per area per time. Cool. So how could a plant increase these benefits? Well, the answer is in the units, right? The plant could increase it by either increasing their leaf area, or they just need more time, like a longer growing season or something like that, right? So either of these things, if they increase, will increase this thing through division. Okay, and what is the cost of a leaf? Well, we read this off of the curve too. It's down here. This is the cost of a leaf. Each leaf is costing about 20 or 25 micromoles of carbon per area per time, right? And so it's important to realize that more area potentially means more benefit, but it also means more cost. And so then the question becomes, how do plants trade off these benefits and these costs? Well, it turns out that, I like models. We can come up with really simple models to predict this. It's actually really straightforward, right? The net benefit that a plant gets is simply the benefits minus the costs. And that's it, right? So the catch then is if we want to be able to predict what individuals are going to do out in the world with ecology, then we basically just need an equation for benefits and we need an equation for costs. And those can be complicated, and I'm not really going to show them to you or expect you to know them, but hopefully it should be easy that the net harvest is just going to be benefits minus costs. So let me show you how this works, right? So let's imagine that this blue line represents the benefits and the red line represents the costs. So this benefits is pretty similar to what we just saw in terms of CO2 curves for photosynthesis. And the cost is just saying that each unit of leaf costs the same as the previous unit. So if we have 2 leaves, it costs double. If we have 3 leaves, it costs triple. It's linear. So how would we figure out what the optimum amount of leaves to produce are? Well, we realize that the plant can't harvest more than 25 because this saturates at 25. So no matter how many leaves the plants make, right, they get sort of diminishing returns. 8 leaves isn't that much better than 6, and 10 isn't that much better than 6 either, right? But 2 is way better than 1. 4 is way better than 2, right? So we got to think about what is the best amount of plants or of leaves that a plant should make. Well, it turns out it's the fattest part of the difference here, right? This is where the benefits are the highest and the costs are the least. And what we can do is we can actually plot, right? So yeah, the best amount of leaves maximizes benefits and minimizes costs. So we can actually plot this green part, the benefits minus the costs, and we get this sort of hump-shaped relationship. And if you can't see where this comes from, I think that this will help, right? So if we look here, benefits minus costs, they're equal, so we get 0. And here, benefits minus costs are equal, so we get 0. So you can see that we're going to cross 0 here and here, these exact same places. And then as we move this way, the space between the two gets wider and wider until it reaches a maximum. And then it starts getting thinner and thinner again. So all we've done is plot the area between these two curves. And that's the net resource harvest. And from there, we can see that something like 2 and a little bit extra leaves is the best strategy for a plant. So it's 2.5 in this example. And notice that this is in units of grams. So just as an aside, I'm not going to expect you to do this in this class, but if you remember all that stuff you had to do in calculus about finding the maximum and the minimum of functions, here's an application of that. If we have the equation for benefits and the equation for costs, we can do all that stuff you learned in calculus to actually make predictions about how plants should grow. And this is a big part of my research in my lab. Right, so we can think about what would we need to make a mathematical model of plant foraging behavior or plant growth, right? Well, we've already figured out the benefits of the above ground parts of plants, the shoots. Plants harvest carbon via photosynthesis, right? Plants also have roots. What are the benefits of roots? You could maybe say this out loud right now, right? What do roots do for a plant? Well, they allow plants to harvest nutrients. They also serve a function of supporting the plant so it doesn't fall over. And also they have they get nutrients. They harvest water and nutrients, and then they have to send those nutrients to other parts of the plant, right? So this creates a sort of a positive feedback loop that's a little bit mathematically complicated, but is rhetorically easy to think about, right? So carbon goes into the leaves. We get plus C. So we know that if we're going to do some math, we got to use a plus sign. But we have to spend some carbon on those leaves too, right? We saw that. Leaves are mostly carbon. Well, they're mostly water, but if you dry them, they're mostly carbon. So leaves gather carbon, but they also cost carbon. Hopefully they're creating more than they're spending. Otherwise, the plant's probably going to die. They're going to have to put some carbon into their stem as well. They're going to have to put some carbon into their roots. And I don't draw it on here, but they're also going to have to put some carbon into their flowers and their seeds and their seed production. Right? So adding more light or more carbon dioxide will probably make a plant bigger. That's pretty easy. Okay, so let's think about roots. All right, so roots are going to get nutrients. Let's say it's just nitrogen for the simplicity, but remember that there's water, there's phosphorus, there's potassium, there's all kinds of things that roots are getting. But again, we've got a plus sign here. Roots have some nitrogen that they need, not very much, but there's protein in there, and protein requires a lot of nitrogen. So some benefits minus some costs. But of course, there's some protein and nitrogen that goes into the stem, and there's quite a bit more that goes into the leaves, right? Leaves can be anywhere from 1 to even 14% nitrogen, because a lot of the photosynthetic structures, the pigments and the enzymes, require quite a bit of nitrogen. Right, so then we could already figure out that if we fertilize a plant or water it, we should generally make it bigger because of this plus sign down here. Right, but this is a positive feedback loop, because if we add both carbon dioxide and nutrients, we're going to make the plant even more bigger than if we only added one of them. So not surprisingly, I'm going to ask you to solve a simple model of a plant, but hopefully this is a little bit more fun than the population models. What I've actually done is I've created a sort of a board game that lets us think about these benefits and these costs in a less annoying way, or maybe a more annoying way. You can let me know in the course evaluations. So if we were in the classroom, we would actually play this. I actually have a physical board game with little wooden cubes that I think is kind of cute. And we're going to actually try to solve this model. So the idea is you have leaves and you have roots, and those are going to generate benefits like we just talked about, right? So every leaf is going to generate 2 carbon on each turn via photosynthesis, and that'll go in your sort of carbon bank, which you can then use to grow whatever tissue you want. Each root you have is going to generate 1 nitrogen per turn through nutrient uptake, and that'll go into your bank, and you can use it to grow tissues. Here are the costs of each tissue. To build a leaf, you need a fair amount of carbon and also nitrogen. To build a stem, you need carbon and you need nitrogen. Roots the same, and then fruits. And then notice over here that the way you win the game is by having the most biological fitness. So the most fruit wins the game. So you have to make sure that you're buying fruit as you're growing. Otherwise, you won't win the game. Like I said, in the classroom, I actually have these cute little wooden pieces. So you have leaves, stems, and roots, as well as fruits. And you have carbon tokens and nitrogen tokens, and we actually use dice to decide the weather, because if there's a drought, you can't do any photosynthesis because you have to close your stomata. There you go, I just said all that. Look at that. All right, so your goal is to make the most fruit, or would that have seeds inside? You are going to start the game as a seed. A seed is provisioned with some carbon and some nutrients by its parent, so it has 6 carbon and 3 nitrogen. So you begin as a seed, and you can allocate your carbon and your nitrogen to growth. So you have to maybe make some leaves and make some roots. You have to think about what you need to gather and what you need to grow. And then each subsequent turn has multiple steps. You're going to roll the dice to determine the weather. If you get a 5 or higher, it's going to be wet enough to open your stomata and photosynthesize, and then you can consult the benefits based on however many leaves you have. Every leaf gets you 2 carbon, so if you have 2 leaves, you get 4. If you have 3 leaves, you get 6. And every root gets you 1 nitrogen. So if you get 5 or higher, go ahead and gather your benefits. If you get a 4 or lower, then unfortunately it's a drought and you don't get to get any resources. So now that you've you've either got some benefits or not, you can allocate those to growth now. So during your next turn, decide what you want to grow, keeping in mind the benefits that you need to gather as you're going forward and how you can win the game with the most fruit. And the growing season lasts 10 turns. Okay, so obviously we can't play the board game version, which normally I would literally hand out a board game to you. So what I have done with the help of a postdoc in my lab, Abdel Holloway, is that we've tried to make this into a sort of online app. And you'll have a link to this after the video in Blackboard. So the instructions that I just gave you are here. So you might want to give these a quick read to make sure you understand. So the way it's going to work is you can see here the growing season lasts 10 turns. This little blue bar up here is going to track your progress. So we start at 0. Here is your resource bank. So I start as a seed with 6 carbon and 3 nitrogen. Shows you the costs of each structure: fruit, leaves, roots, stems. It also shows me how many I have. Currently I have 0 of all of them. So I start with 6 carbon and 3 nitrogen. So what I'm going to do is I am going to grow a leaf and a root maybe. So now I've spent all of it. Now make sure you hit the grow button, otherwise you won't actually grow. All right, so I grew. You can see now I have 1 leaf and 1 root, and there's a cute little picture down here. Abdel and I are not computer programmers or artists, so this is the best we can do. I'm sorry for that. All right, so now that I've grown, I have no more resources, I have no more carbon. Check to make sure that you have 0 in here, that you've bought everything you meant to. And now you click the rain button. This is going to roll 2 dice, and fake dice. And unfortunately, it didn't rain for me. So I miss a turn. So you can see no rain means that we have a drought, so I don't get to get any carbon or any nitrogen, right? Because I need rain in order to be able to grow. So you have to hit the rain button again. All right, so it rained. That's great news. You can see that I had 1 leaf and I had 1 carbon. Sorry, I had 1 leaf and I had 1 root, so I get some resources. So I can think about what I'm going to grow now. So maybe I want to grow a stem. Maybe I want to grow another root. So I've spent everything. I got to make sure I press the grow button to spend them. And there we go. We've grown a little plant. It has a stem. It has a leaf. It has a root. So now that I've spent everything, I can press the rain button. The computer will roll 2 fake dice. The progress bar goes up. You can see that it rained again. So I got 2 carbon, 2 nitrogen. So I think I want another leaf. So maybe I need to wait. So I'm going to just hit rain, wait a turn. All right, I finally have enough to buy another leaf. That's good because I need carbon, right? If I don't buy a leaf, then I can't have carbon. So I'm going to make sure I grow that leaf. You can see my little plant now has 2 leaves on its little stump here. Click the rain button and so on. You can see that now I have 2 leaves, so I got 4 carbon. And I now have up to 4 nitrogen. Maybe I'm going to buy a fruit. I've grown the fruit and so on. Hit the rain button. You get the idea. So what I want you to do is try to maximize the amount of fruit that you got. And whoever has the most fruits wins the game. So I can usually get about 10 fruits. I want you to see if anyone can beat that.